Welcome back to Under Oath. Today we have actor, producer Anthony Michael Hall. Anthony, can you hear me?
I can, Jeff. Thank you. Thanks for having me today.
Oh, man, I can tell you about, we used to do Wizard conventions together a long time ago. I was a comic book writer at the time, and I would bump into you every once in a while at these they were huge events, but we used to hang out in, like, have drinks and everything else at the bars at these conventions later on, and it was just such a smaller environment back then.
Yeah, it's a real culture that's grown, hasn't it? It's amazing. It started out with just comic book writers, as you know, I think in the 70s, and then it really spawned a whole industry. So I've been doing those shows for 20 years, and I'm proud to talk about it. They're a lot of fun. They bring people together, and it's a real culture, as you know. It's a lot of fun.
And I've got to meet a lot of actors on the job doing those conventions.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, my daughter was a huge fan of all the John Hughes movies, and she was like 8 or 9 at the time. And, I made time one time because she wanted to meet you and she wanted to meet Molly. And, Molly was her favorite actor at the time. And when she met you,
Right.
It was over. She goes, you were unbelievably nice to you. I can't tell you how nice you were to her, and it changed her life. I mean, she's in theater and college right now, and a lot of that had to do with you.
Oh, that's really sweet to hear. I appreciate it. It's important to remember those connections you made. When I was growing up, people that I've met, whether it's athletes or musicians or actors, you want to make a good impression. That's nice to hear. I'm glad your daughter's doing well.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Now, you have a new movie, Roswell Delirium. I just saw you in Reacher, so you're all over the place right now.
Yeah. This is a co-production between my company, Manhattan Films, and the writer-director named Rick Bakewell, who's a great guy who's become a good friend, and his company, Light Force Pictures. And I'll tell you a little bit about it. It has interesting sci-fi themes. It ultimately becomes a family drama because it's about a mother and a daughter, and it takes place sort of in present day, and then it flashes back to the 80s. And I play a character who is essentially a therapist who is running a kind of a group session with all these people that were either contactees that had sort of alien-like experiences, or they're dealing with some other issues. And so what happens is that I kind of help with, I help this young girl whose character's name is Mayday to make these connections with her own past. And so what you realize is that, you don't know if it's sort of happening in her head or is she misremembering these things in terms of her being a contactee to the aliens. And ultimately what emerges is a story about mental illness. And you realize her mother is ultimately kind of, dealing with some challenges. So, it's a very interesting film. It has some lightness and some humor into it. It has sci-fi themes, and ultimately becomes sort of a family drama, as I mentioned. So it's powerful. And it's a really good project in terms of the actors and all the kids that really taught us all a lesson. Making the film, they all came to work super prepared. There's a cast of young actors that are wonderful in the film. And then we've got some great cameos from people like Dee Wallace Stone and Lisa Whelchel and Reginald Vell Johnson and Sam Jones, some older actors that really came in to support and did a great job as well. So it's a beautiful film. We're very proud of it. And it's available on Amazon and also on Apple.
Now, as a producer, you probably get offered a lot. A lot of scripts come to you, and you're constantly thinking, I don't know if this is the one, this is the one. How do you choose it and you say, yeah, I think this is the one we're going to do next?
Right. Well, I think it also starts with the writing and being the blueprint. And with my company, this is our second film. The first one we did was called The Class, and it was kind of a modern-day spin on The Breakfast Club, actually, with a writer-director named Nick Solozzi, who was out of Chicago. And the same thing was true on this, where I was looking for a great script, and I was really impressed by Rick Bakewell, who's our writer-director, and he did a beautiful job with this. And as I said, it's sort of a compelling kind of family drama that emerges through these other things that are themes, and it's very powerful, and at the same time, there's a lot of fun, kind of lighter-hearted references to the 80s with some of the actors that people remember from that period. So I think Rick did a great job just putting together a really good script that we all wanted to go make. And then we went from there. Yeah, we shot the film about 2 years ago here in L.A., and it turned out beautifully. Yeah.
Well, since then, our government has decided to have hearings on UFOs and everything and actually legitimize it as a realistic thing that could be happening. While you're making this movie, are you thinking, oh, my God, the government might come out and say aliens do exist?
Well, absolutely, because that's something that we thought about. And it's interesting that Rick refers to Roswell in the film as Space Rock, so we kind of gave it this fictitious name, but, we actually shot sequences out by the Salton Sea for those sequences. And it's, and again, as you said, it's kind of hearkening back to the whole Roswell period. And a lot of people have differing ideas about that. Some people see it as completely gospel and real and legit, and some people see it as a lark, something that's maybe a smoke screen, or something that's not necessarily legitimate. So it just depends on where you sit with that, But with this, it was interesting because Rick uses it as sort of a screen, because what you're realizing is the further we dig in with this character, and that's the character played by Ashton Selecki, and her character's name is Mayday. You see in the therapy that she's trying to come to peace with these things, and these things that she was taught and that she was shown by her mother. And then really what emerges is you realize that I think the mother was really dealing with some mental health issues. And so it's really more simply about that.
Now, as a producer and creator, there's a lot more outlets open for movies than used to be. I mean, it used to be just cinema and that's it, but now you have all these streaming services. Is that an unbelievable opportunity? Are we living in a golden age right now?
I think so. I think it's a great question you brought up. Yeah, I mean, I often think about this in the context of time. Like, we're living in a new century. When we were growing up, it was like, we had 3 or 4 networks, right? It was 3 networks, then there was Fox, then we had cable in the 80s, and now here we are. Everything has become, quotes around this, content or streaming, right? So just for example, in the last 3 or 4 years of my own career, I've worked alternately for Amazon and Netflix a bunch, so I think it is a good opportunity. I weigh on the side of that it's a great opportunity because there's more choices now. And I think from a creative standpoint, filmmakers that had challenges, let's say, getting their film made as an independent, can transfer to television, and you're given a bigger canvas, and you can create a limited series, so to speak. And so, I've seen that, whether I'm working on shows like Reacher or that I went and shot a show like Wednesday in Dublin, Ireland for Tim Burton last summer. That's at the high end of the scale. And then at the smaller end of the scale, you have opportunities for young filmmakers like the guy I'm working with here, Rick Baker. We did a film that we're very proud of, but it is a one-off, standalone independent film. But thank God, it's premiering on Amazon and also on Apple, and it's available on VOD on those outlets. So to your question, yeah, I think it is a great opportunity. It's a great time because there is much more opportunity now. And more options, I think, for audiences, too, which makes it also good.
How tough is it as a producer when there's something in a script and you go, wow, this would be amazing, but it would just cost too much?
Well, it is challenging, but I think there's another aspect, too, which is technology has become lighter, more accessible, and more mobile, whether it's our phones or even on sets. Big old traditional lights like, 5Ks and 10Ks and these huge lights you would see that were kind of always synonymous with filmmaking, are now replaced by like these light LED lights, and cameras are lighter. The camera bodies are lighter. There's a lot of technical aspects that have, I think, put the power in filmmakers' hands, because it's a lot easier to make stuff. At the same time, it's no less challenging to get it distributed. So you got to make good things, good projects. But I think it is an opportunity, absolutely, in a new century where there's a lot of opportunities. And because of all these streaming networks, there's more room for more opportunity, and new voices, which I think is exciting.
I was talking to somebody the other day about that film and digital, and I said, film, you wouldn't see what happened until you got the film back. I mean, the huge advancement of moving to digital where you can see something immediately must just be an unbelievably helpful thing.
Well, you said it, because I've literally lived through that transition. When I was a kid starting out in the 80s on films, there would be dailies, and you'd wait for the film to return from the lab. And then the key primary people, like the producers and the directors, everybody would get together and watch the dailies. But often actors would be disallowed into the dailies because they don't want them to get too involved in their performance, And then all these years later, you go on a set, and the first thing you do is you go to Video Village, which is basically the director and the key department head sitting around a TV screen, and they're watching what's being filmed, right? So it's like, it's completely morphed where everyone is ultimately watching, from a small screen. Then, you cut to when I worked with a guy like the great Christopher Nolan back in 2007 when I did The Dark Knight, and he was walking around with a handheld, what's called a clamshell, which is basically like a small monitor, So I think technology is interesting. It streamlined things in many ways, but ultimately, you still got to make good product and you got to deliver.
Now, you've been a working actor for decades. What possibly convinces you to go, hey, you know what? I need to be responsible for making these right now. I really need this headache in my life.
It's funny you said it like that. Well, I think just being grateful for all the people that I've worked for. I think it was, maybe Isaac Newton who said that we're all standing on the shoulders of giants, right? So in my career in life, I tell you, Jeff, I've had so many great people I've been able to work for, like whether it was Maddie Simmons at National Lampoon or Harold Ramis or John Hughes, of course, and Lorne Michaels, the people that gave me opportunities. So I'm just grateful. And to be honest with you, it was always in my planning, even from when I was a kid working with John Hughes, that one day I would hopefully get to this point where I could have a company and do my own thing. And so that's what I'm trying to do. I'm endeavoring to, with Manhattan Films, to make good projects and to do different things, and always working, always keeping busy. I have Wednesday coming out later this summer, Netflix, and then I just shot another film at the beginning of the year in Hawaii that was produced by Kenan Thompson from SNL. And his partner, Johnny Ryan Jr., and that's called Halloween Store. It's kind of a Halloween comedy. And then a couple of years ago, I did Halloween Kills with Jamie Lee Curtis. So I'm always trying to mix it up as an actor and find new opportunities and find new places and collaborators to work with. So in terms of having a company, it was kind of like that thing of like, I don't know what else to do because this is what I've done all my life, and this is what I know best is production. So I'm grateful for it, and I intend to continue to build the company out and deliver more projects, and we want to kind of mix it up. I've learned a lot from people like John Hughes, so I certainly would love to do comedies. When I work with someone like Jason Blum, I learned a lot there because, again, this guy's made it quite a business and sold his business to Universal with Blumhouse and doing horror. So I think you want to mix it up and play to different genres and do different things, and that makes it and keeps it exciting.
Now, this is a hard one for me because you just mentioned that you got to work with a bunch of kids. And every once in a while, I forget how long I've been doing a lot of things. When you see these kids, is there like a flashback situation when you see them and go, God, I remember when I was that age?
Well, totally. And like I said, this is when I was doing the SNL rounds and I took my wife to New York for that. I was also promoting Reacher season 3. But, when I was on the carpet at 30 Rock and I was sitting there reflecting on this, it just hit me on the carpet. Like, this is my 49th year in the business. I started a year later in 1976, and SNL started in 1975, and I was 8 years old. And again, I got to work with Steve Allen. That was one I forgot to mention. One of the greats, and I did a play with Steve Allen when I was a little boy, and I played him in a play, actually. And so it was actually, that's who gave me my start in the business was the great Steve Allen, who went on to create The Tonight Show and, as you know, wrote hundreds of songs and was a published author. So I've been really blessed in my life to have these mentors, to have these people that really inspired me and from a young age saw something in me. So, it's two things. It's kind of surreal all these years later to be producing and to produce a film like Roswell Delirium, where we have a cast of beautiful and talented young child actors who did a great job. And I tell you, if anything, they taught us something because it was just a refresher and a reminder to be grateful for the work. They all came so prepared. They were really there to deliver and do good work. And they were just also very joyful and happy to be there on set. So those were great reminders for all the so-called adults on set, myself included, at the top of the list.
It's just so amazing to me studying your career, going through every time I see you in something, I'm like, oh God, I remember, so many things. We have about a minute left and I'm going to be selfish. If you could give one bit of advice to an actor who's starting to do their career like my daughter, what do you think it would be?
Well, never give up just comes to mind right away. It's really important to have a sense of determination and to decide to do something. I think that's something that many of us can struggle with in life. But once you decide to do something, you got to follow through. And so I just was very determined as a young kid, and I have been all my life. And I've never looked at it like it was a given, or I've never had a sense of entitlement about it. Just the opposite. Because I've been an actor for hire all my life, it's taught me to really value and appreciate the work. And interesting that it links back to the reminders that we all got on set from all the child actors that, you have to be prepared, you have to come with a good attitude, and you have to also appreciate and operate with a sense of gratitude in life. And I think that's really, really important because no matter what walk of life, you can see it. You can look at the people that surround you at work or in life and the people that have and maintain a positive mindset and attitude versus people that just can't and that are more challenged by that. So I think that's what the great lesson that these kids taught us when we were making this film. I'm very proud of them. They all did a beautiful job. And we got great performances from a lot of really beautiful the seasoned actors like Dee Wallace Stone, Reginald L. Johnson shows up in the film, Lisa Whelchel, Sam Jones, a lot of people that an older audience would recognize as well. So it's a really beautiful, nice combination of sort of more established talents and younger talents that are emerging. So it was really, really refreshing that way as a producer to see all that unfold.
Well, I can't thank you enough for doing this interview, and I look forward to seeing you in many more productions. Be well, my friend.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Jeff. Good being with you.